Once again, Dhrupad Karwa on the Vinamra Kasana show. How's it going, my man?
I am wonderful, dude. How are you?
I'm fantastic. I am happy to have now made progress since the last time we were here on the podcast. I was back then. I was using a Yeti microphone. I've upgraded since then. Back then, you were still working. You were in the early stages of what will become Get Inspo, but as far as I know, it's going to be launched next month. So clearly, we have seen how time passes and how
Yeah.
things change. Um, but I want to start from your Twitter. Now, we were just talking before the podcast about how your tweets have to do with inspiration because get inspo or just inspo. I hope I'm getting that right. Is it get inspo or inspo?
It's inspo and the domain is get inspo. So
Get inspo.
yeah.
Fantastic. Fantastic. So it's an AI based startup for inspiration, right? And considering that you're working on that day in and day out, your Twitter is a reflection of the insights that you get from that. Very literally your inspirations, right? Um, I guess the first thing we could sort of do is um, talk about just the term inspiration alone, because this is something that this I personally left this word from my dictionary a long time ago. Once I realized that there's a whole bevy of people in the world who believe that inspiration is bullshit, and they believe that there's this whole stoic idea of just pushing through it and making things happen without necessarily feeling that creative spark always. Your startup idea, on the other hand, is an exact opposition to that. Yeah, so it's just strange to me that um, there is still a lot of hope and aspirations tied around that term. I mean, considering that you're building an entire startup around that.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really good way to put it. I think one of the challenges when we think about a term like inspiration is that it is super intangible,
Hmm.
right? It's like an abstraction and it's something that a lot of people think is, as you said, just divined from the sky.
Hmm.
And sometimes it happens, more oftentimes it doesn't. And because we can't understand it, most people, especially let's say outside of creative industries, just leave it alone.
Right.
Or it's used very, very casually,
Hmm.
right? In lots and lots of different contexts. And I think by working on Inspo and thinking just a lot about this problem, I realized that it can actually be consciously designed, not just divined, right? It's not just
Right.
something that has to fall from the sky in a moment of enlightenment. It's something that you can actually, and incorporate into your life on a daily basis.
Hmm.
And of course, there are some times you will be feeling like a lot more energized than other times, but that doesn't mean that there shouldn't be, you shouldn't be exposed to streams of inspiration on a regular basis. And also, when we think about inspiration, we don't think of it in terms of like a loose pixie dust kind of a way, right? We're thinking about it in an extremely organized, intelligent,
Hmm.
synthesized manner. So, yeah, and I think honestly, that's what makes me so excited about the opportunity. I feel as with so many things in your life, when you work on something, you realize and learn a lot more about your own self through that process.
Right.
And I think working on Inspo and of course HaikuJAM before that, the thing I've learned the most is that I love working on these kind of abstract ideas, right? I prefer to work on things that a lot of people just aren't thinking about or have dismissed, and
Hmm.
there's very, very little competition as well, right?
Hmm.
And then and our job is not just to build a product, but to go 10 layers deep on the concept itself, think about it from first principles, and then emerge with a product and an offering and a brand and all the rest. So yeah, I'm
Right.
having a lot of fun.
I mean, I'd like to take a step back and let's go say 6 to 18 to 12 months before you even had the idea, right? Um, what ways were you incorporating inspiration into your own life? And there's some conventional answers here, right? We can start to sort of circumambulate that whole concept of how inspiration comes to people, right?
Yep.
People take long walks, right? Long walks, churn ideas. People escape via geography. They travel, right? They will hang out in a place that they haven't hung out in before, which leads to some, thoughts, triggering thoughts, so on and so forth. Um, but considering that you said that it's you work on things that people haven't thought about before. I'm sure there must be some sort of personal investment in this, and I'm wondering how did that come about?
Well, that's a great question. So I think there's two key parts to this for me. The first part is, as you rightly suggested, inspiration is definitely a big part of my life. There's definitely been a lot of phases where I've just been deeply uninspired, and I noticed a pattern there in my behavior. And when I look at the phases of great inspiration, there was also a pattern. And typically in those phases of inspiration, very simply, I was just exposing myself to a lot of creative thinking, right, in formats that I enjoy, right?
Could you give me some examples?
For sure. So for me, like reading fiction is a huge source of inspiration, especially fiction from lots of different cultures and different parts of the world, or about a particular topic that I'm interested in, right? Like an extremely non-fictional topic. But I always love, even before I dive in to understand it, right? I love just to get a fictional take on it. For me, I find that inspires a much richer perspective. And then the second piece is around the 6 to 7 months before Inspo, and I think it was a combination of all of the experiments and learning from HaikuJAM, as well as my own personal interest, the team's interests, and it was a process. I don't think there was one single defining moment. It was like an evolution of like good decision making. The way that Inspo even happened was by like running data science experiments on the HaikuJAM corpus, because there was so much creative content being created. And we had this hypothesis that this is just a wellspring of ideas, insights, and inspiration that could be useful in so many contexts, right? In brand marketing, in wellness, in mental health. Right. And so, yeah, we basically just started analyzing content around different topics, like ice cream for Baskin Robbins, or chai coffee for Chai Point, and a bunch of stuff like that. And that itself was an inspiring experience, right? Like we were able to figure out so many fascinating things. It inspired so much new thinking for the creative industries, for brands, for us ourselves, and we kind of went from there.
So Inspo, just to get that right, is a tool for writers to get inspired using automated artificial intelligence. Is that what it is?
So almost in one line, you can think of it as your AI inspiration partner, right? So one analogy that we like to think about is that in a lot of especially creative teams, oftentimes there's like a creative partner, a strategic partner, right? A copy
that's
partner.
very common in advertising, in the world of advertising as well.
Exactly. So but there's no one that necessarily owns inspiration. Right. That's something that's, again, almost just taken for granted. Like that will come, right? Like creatives will have their own processes. Like you said, they'll go for walks. They'll read, they'll watch ads, they'll do whatever they need to. But oftentimes it doesn't come, because if you see like a lot of completed work, it's just deeply uninspired, right? So we felt that Inspo is a stakeholder in that particular setup. It's the inspiration partner that is supercharging and unlocking a lot of creative thinking for the entire team. And whilst it can be used, by writers, at least in the beta, we've seen a very strong use case for almost all of the stakeholders within that workflow, whether it's a planner, a strategic partner, a copywriter, or a designer. We're still figuring out a lot of those use cases, but that's more or less what it is.
Yeah. I studied advertising in college, and one of the first things that I noticed about working with partners, because what you do when you were doing an advertising degree is you sort of mimic what would typically be like a workday in a traditional advertising agency.
Right.
So it usually starts with you get a brief to come up with an idea, right? And then have a tagline, blah blah blah, all those things. The hardest part about all of that was believing that ideas could come by the first brainstorming session. And so what would happen often is, since most of the students were in it just to get it done, just to get the grade, right?
Yeah.
I would often notice how bad ideas would get cemented in groups, especially when neither of the partners had done the research before. They just sort of came in together, let whatever first thought rose up to the surface cement, and that was the plan. And there was a sort of settling into it that I did not like. And I realized my grade was suffering. So what I would do is I would spend a day with the brief alone and then bring my ideas, so that what we would do in that meeting is reach some degree of persuasion about why my idea works, and like try to figure out consensus, something like that, as opposed to just chiming in with ideas right there and then. So I also realized that it really is a personal process. And based on what you're saying that it can be productized. I mean, Inspo is literally a product that sells inspiration.
So I think aspects of the creative process can definitely be productized, but not to replace, right? But rather just to augment. So I think it would be like unpardonably arrogant if we were to say, right, this is going to be your inspiration process now,
Right.
Vinamre, right? Like you don't need to take walks anymore. You don't need to do whatever it is that you're doing before. You only need this product. That would be ludicrous. All we are saying is that there is a world in which we can insert ourselves into your process, whatever your process is, and elevate it in a way that you can't even imagine right now. So just for example, from you raised a really important point, something we thought about a lot, especially when we built the very first couple of versions, is that one of the reasons the brainstorming process is broken is because people they don't spend the time to go broad, right? I think that one of the key parts of an early brainstorm is that you want to generate like a diverse set of associations and possibilities. So you want to go broad before you go deep.
Right.
But oftentimes in an in-person brainstorm, there is a lot of almost like time bias. Like you latch on early to either the loudest voices in the room or the first few ideas that you had, when actually it would be a lot better, as you said, just to sit on it for a day
Right.
and force yourself to push out another like 30 or 40. But it's tough, and it requires like high levels of almost discipline and motivation. And whilst it's awesome that you possess those qualities and cultivate those, a lot of people don't. And especially then, let's say in a professional environment when people are busy, right? Like I think one of the things that we've heard so much from creatives is how just like stressful the industry is and how uninspired a lot of these workplaces sound. So this is exactly where Inspo can help. It because it's powered by AI and a lot of very interesting technology. It will generate a diverse set of associations and possibilities within seconds.
Right.
But then that's really where our job ends. I think one of the core calls that we've taken as a product team is that we will only ever operate within the world of creative thinking, right? So as soon as it comes to execution, right, whether you're going to be putting together a creative on Canva or going into Photoshop or wherever, that is where our product roadmap and journey ends, right? Because I think, and in fact, this is one of the big reasons why we exist as well. If you were to crudely split up the creative process into 3 stages, let's say like thinking, doing, and then sharing and publishing and monetizing. There has been a crazy amount of innovation on the latter part of that funnel, right? On the doing tools, on the sharing, on the publishing. So many tools, right? That's helping creators, whether it's make podcasts or produce ads or record videos or whatever it is. There's been an explosion, and that's great. I do think that's really, really important. But when we look at that very first stage, creative thinking, ideation, planning, brainstorming, you're probably going to struggle to come up with like meaningful innovation, right, within that space. I mean, most people still go to Google, right, for a starting point, and Google is a really uninspired starting point, right? It was designed to inform us, never to inspire.
Right.
So that's essentially the stage that we hope to own and deliver a lot of value on.
When you were saying that, I couldn't help but think I have an enormous amount of SaaS subscriptions and not enough journals and ways
Right.
to think. So when I think about my process of thought, it literally is just pen and paper. The best I can do is maybe have conversations with the people around me, but that's about it. So you're really right about that, because I have Zoom Pro, I have Spotify, I have all these tools that allow me to do my job better. I have like an entire Adobe suite, a bunch of things, right? And then I've got these platforms, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, to publish. But then the craft part, right? Especially now with this whole advent. I mean, I know I saw in your bio that you've also written building inspo in public. I've been seeing this again and again and again, and I'm using it myself unconsciously. I'm seeing people like David Perel and Jack Butcher also use it, talk about it. Um, the only sort of problem I have with building in public is that it somehow leads to the unconscious assumption that you don't have to work on your craft anymore. If you just keep sharing and sort of daily publishing, it will sort itself out. And I realized day in after day in after day, I have another YouTube channel that does pretty well. It's in Hindi, where I give writing advice, do vlogs, a bunch of stuff, right? And when I'm doing this podcast with you, I'm that exactly in that exact space of my life where I'm in a creative drought. Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way, the 4 pages on helping, walks on helping. Like, it's just, I'm stuck. And I'm wondering if it's because I took the building in public too literally and didn't pay enough time to what I was doing, like the thinking part. And it's only coming back to me in full circle now. So I'm wondering, there's inspo for that. What are like some other traditional methods slash techniques that you were that you looked to for inspiration when you were creating this?
I'm just digesting what you said.
I'm sorry.
So to answer the question directly, what were the other techniques and methods? I think I read a lot about books, in short, actually, right? Reading a lot of interesting books and blogs about the creative process. So there's a wonderful book by the founders of IDEO about creative confidence, right? And how people can cultivate their creative confidence. I love their blog and their podcast as well, and it's all about how do you, how do you cultivate people's creativity, and also creativity within teams and organizations. And then honestly, a lot of conversations, right? I think more than actually even reading and thinking and being stuck in my own head. We as a team, we've had hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of Zoom conversations with potential customers, right? That was even before we had a product.
Right.
And we still do those as we have a product. We speak to customers every single day to learn, actually, to learn about their pains, to learn about the processes. And that has been hugely informative and actually pretty inspiring. I think those conversations actually just gave us a lot of conviction, right? Because otherwise it was quite an abstract idea. It would have just been like something, cool, but we may have just been working on it for the sake of it. But once we actually spoke with folks in the industry and from outside, just doing different creative things, we learned that, wow, there seems to be a real latent need here, right? To do, and that wasn't because people were saying, oh, we're always stuck for inspiration, but rather because we just, as we were saying at the start of this conversation, there's a lot of stress in the industry. There's a crazy amount of time pressure.
Yeah.
And then linking back to what you were saying about building in public, there is this like almost performative pressure for individuals, brands, personal brands, everybody to always just keep talking and talking and talking and talking incessantly, right? And it's like, I think taking moment marketing to just perverse new levels where every single moment is an opportunity to sell and have a conversation. And as a result, like none of it means anything. So, and this kept coming up in so many different conversations and different manifestations and different contexts.
The moment marketing part, the part about building in public?
Not the part about building in public per se, but the point that like there's never enough time, right? Like client will give us 2 hours to pull something off. There's not time to like deeply, meaningfully think. everything
Yeah.
is just churned and stressful, and like you need to get something out the next day. Um, and as a result, people are either burning out or just deeply disillusioned and cynical, right?
Hmm.
One of the things I found really quite shocking was some of the more senior conversations we had with like agency heads or creative directors. Um, for some reason, I just assumed that those would be the most like energetic folks,
Hmm.
right, in the room, and yet they were the most like cynical creatures that I've happened upon in quite a while. I think they were just like really burned out from all the things that are happening, and it felt like, wow, okay, it seems like
Hmm.
a product like ours could help them. So yeah, that's those are my thoughts on it.
Hmm. Interesting. When you have these conversations with people ranging from, entry level jobs in the creative industry to all the way to, like the founders, I'm wondering if, and I know you said that inspo will never ever enter the execution phase. It's only, primarily serve as an inspiration partner. But I'm wondering if that led to maybe even like, side conversations around workflow structure, leaving time in your day to have thinking gaps, all of those things. Did those happen?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think, and this is where, as you said, it's an extremely personal process,
Hmm.
right? So there were, yeah, I mean, so many. I'm struggling to think of one now, even though there've been thousands of kind of anecdotes. But a lot of folks would tell us how, like, you know, most of their creative work would happen very late at night,
Hmm.
not even when they were at work at the agency, but when they were back at home, right? And the being at work was just doing like, the kind of operational things and a little bit of brainstorming.
Hmm.
But actually, they'd carve out a special time for themselves to think.
Hmm.
And some folks would go literally like leave the office, take a walk, put on their headphones, grab a coffee, tea breaks, and there was one quite memorable guy from Dentsu who
Hmm.
said that like all he does is watch Netflix when he's
Hmm.
brainstorming, right?
Interesting.
And that's all he does. He watches like aggressive amounts of Netflix at work in his office. He was like he was quite a senior guy, so I think he got away with it. But yeah, and he said that's just when my creativity flows, when I'm watching an awesome series,
Hmm.
and in parallel thinking about a problem, and then
Hmm.
oftentimes like synthesizing the associations that I'm seeing within the show
Hmm.
and my own thoughts. So super personal, super personal.
Hmm.
And I think honestly, there was a huge product insight for us there as well. That we aren't actually building like an individual destination product that you will go to and get inspired, quote unquote. But we're actually building almost like a an internet protocol, a layer of
Hmm.
an inspirational layer that can operate wherever you are in the
Right.
way that you choose, right? Whether also on a gross level, like either on your laptop or your desktop, or on a more subtle level, plugins, widgets, notifications on your email when there's something topical and relevant to you. So you don't have to go to the product to get value; the product will come to you.
Hmm.
And that's been a huge mindset shift for us, actually,
Hmm.
because I think yeah, most folks who build just assume that people will come in and use your product to get value, and yeah, that's true. And if that's why we're building it as well. If you want almost the Ferrari version of the experience, then you have to come onto the site. But you don't need to unlock value on a very regular
Hmm.
cadence. So
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, I'm wondering if you met people on different sides of the spectrum, especially when it comes to attention spans. Did you meet people who could concentrate for long hours? Because I think that, and this is just my hypothesis, eventually what's going to happen is people are going to shift back to some degree of digital minimalism as they figure out that they cannot concentrate on anything for more than 5 seconds. And I'm wondering if you, when you were doing these quote unquote insight interviews or like figuring out, how to make the best product possible, were there people who could just concentrate like a monk?
wow, this is something I was literally thinking about this morning,
Hmm.
based on a conversation I was having with a friend. It's interestingly, we didn't consciously ask this question. I think, and also, I think people aren't going to necessarily be very honest about this, right? I think the reality is that we are all like dramatically distracted,
Hmm.
right? In fact, on a complete side tangent, one cool random idea for I wouldn't even call it a product, but an interesting service would be to let you know on email or a notification each day how much you have scrolled in using a very tangible metric like meters or feet, right?
Wow.
Not how much time you spent, because I don't even know what that means anymore. Like, okay, but like,
Yeah.
Vinamre, you scrolled 200 meters today, like the length of an Olympic swimming pool. And it's like, would that make it a little bit more real for people? So, which I think that's quite a cool idea. I should probably do that at some point.
Wow, that's actually very
Um,
cool because Instagram schedulers, the ones that put a time limit on like how much you use that, those have failed.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, so exactly. I think just to tell a different story around those metrics would be interesting.
Hmm.
But I am inclined to agree with you, right? I think the world is definitely becoming a little bit more. Oh, I mean, I think it's been aware for a while that there's a serious distraction problem.
Hmm.
But it's good to see that people aren't just like accepting it and saying, well, it is the way it is, right? I think there will be a huge demand for, as you said, digital minimalism or, silent retreats or just like slightly more conscious products that aren't just like frenetic and hyperactive and always
Hmm.
like, just dragging you
On.
in and sucking
Yeah.
your time, right? That's just, um, I mean, one interesting kind of insight that we uncovered is that there was almost like two types of creative in all of those conversations. Right after those few hundred, you realize that there was a certain kind of there's almost like two different personalities. Um, the first person was just looking to get their work done as much as possible. So maybe like your friends back in college,
Hmm.
right? Like I got the brief, I just need to get it done, right? And honestly, those were the worst conversations, and those folks never really used Inspo a lot,
Right.
right? Because I think they were expecting like one-click campaigns, right? It's World Book Day. I type in books, build me the campaign, right? I don't
Yeah.
want to synthesize. I don't want to think too much. I don't want to look at too many things. I just want it all ready for me.
Hmm.
And Inspo can do a lot of things, but we're not even designing for it to do that, right? Because we philosophically we believe that like, humans are awesome at being creative, and machines are great at optimizing and also just like unlocking capabilities within yourself.
Right.
Um, so those folks, yeah, they churned or weren't that interested. But the people who like loved, genuinely had a deep love and appreciation for creativity and the creative process, they've been really loving it. They've been really enjoying the product because for them,
Hmm.
it's actually it is an augmentation tool. It's something that like it's like your inspiration partner. It's always on 24 hours a day. Even when you're sleeping, it's thinking, it's tinkering, it's figuring out like associations, patterns around the things that you care about, and then it will surface them to you. So,
Hmm.
which is cool, which is not something you can get anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, if you don't have a good enough connection with your quote unquote subconscious mind, it can be difficult to have that come up naturally. Like how people will
Yeah.
have inspiration or like solve problems in their dreams, or like when they're doing something that requires like the exertion of their all of their physical body, right? That's when ideas will come up. The other thing that I was thinking of when you were saying how it's sort of hard for people to get stuff done on Inspo, and especially when they're just like looking to get their work done. I was thinking about when I'm at a loss of ideas, I will go and hit up like 7 or 8 people who are in my family or in my, my friends. The issue with those is it's a very hit and miss method because
Yeah.
you have to contextualize your situation to fit their own, life circumstances and a bunch of different things. And it just, by the time you communicate what you're exactly looking for, um, it's just that the verbalization process is already like defeated you halfway, and you don't want to like get through the whole like ordeal of like, oh, so what do you think about this? I'm stuck with this specific problem. Can you help me based on your life experiences? And that's a lot of challenge. And if a machine can help me with that, if it understands me, and well, it doesn't love me conditionally, then there's great benefits to that.
I think a really good way of thinking about it is that any good brainstorm happens with more than one person, right? There's got to be a few of you, and the whole point is that you are storming the brains and collective experiences and wisdom and knowledge and nodes of those n number of people.
Right.
What's incredible about AI and technology is that it can storm the brains and minds of a lot of people,
Yeah.
right? At the same time, simply because that content or data is uploaded, it's online somewhere, and it's thinking like along that graph. Now, of course, huge limitations, right? As in, like, it's all articulated, published content that's manifested. It's not actually in someone's head, but it can still be incredibly valuable. You know, within a so one of the ways that Inspo works is it supports a lot of different content streams, like 17, 18, right? And these are different, these are all like, these offer different lenses into a topic. So if you type in the word coffee on Inspo, it will show you, you know, jams from HaikuJAM, which offers you like a poetic and almost a subconscious lens into what coffee means to people. It shows you quotes from Goodreads and famous books, which shows you a more like sort of timeless, you know, timeless representation of the idea. It will show you the latest ad campaigns around coffee to see how are those stories manifesting in advertising. It will show you lyrics, rap, you know, videos, photographs. So like, it's just like, again, showing you that extremely diverse range of perspectives and lenses into a topic. But then it's on you to synthesize, right? Using recent technologies like GPT-3, Inspo does also generate thought starters. So it will pick out the key associations around concepts, and it will generate like kind of low fidelity creatives that you can read, consume, and enjoy. And the purpose of them, again, is just to make the job easier for you. But the ambition isn't that you'll just take one of those and turn it into your campaign, because I don't think that's how great breakthrough ideas are going to take place. So again, big learning is for us is so right now we're gearing up to launch it like a public beta, and just writing up like the manifesto and the landing page. And I think one thing we're going to make really clear is who Inspo is not for, as well as who it is for. Because I think that's just going to make our lives a lot easier. If you don't value creativity, or you're just actually just looking to get the job done in a minimum amount of time, and not requiring, you know, yourself to think that much, it's just not ever going to be a great tool for you, ever. Now, and the bet that we are sort of taking is on like humanity's willingness to think and be creative. Yeah, maybe we're wrong, right? Maybe we realize that actually people just want to shave off those minutes in their day even more and optimize so that they can, I don't know, go on TikTok. But I don't think that view is gonna prevail. I think people are like aspirationally, they want to come up with great ideas and do good things in the world. So yeah, we'll see.
I think we're going to suffocate mediocrity very, very soon. I mean, that's just my hypothesis, because I also had the chance to work in a new digital media company in Mumbai. And very surprisingly, I'm speaking in broad strokes here, but like the entry level creatives idea of thinking and like coming up with campaign ideas was the equivalent of smoking a joint in the middle of breaks. And it's just it's very incoherent. I've like seen people come up with stuff based on that. It's incoherent, it's inconsistent. It just shows like a person trying to get a job done, but it hasn't come from the deep recesses of their own being. And I also understand that that's not possible always.
Yep.
But I still think you can be at least moderately happy about the stuff that you've done, even if it's a failure, right? And that usually comes from a conscious understanding of the effort you've put in. If you know you've fluked it, if you've just like done it like that, people might celebrate that fluke, but deep down inside, you know that you didn't put your mind into it. You didn't think. You just blurted out the first thing. Want to take a slight segue from here and talk to you about the things you've had to learn or upgrade in your own skill sets, mindsets, as now founder of this new startup, right? The last time we talked, I was still uncertain about the podcast space. I've built two small content niches in both sides, and I'm basically in that on that step where I have a team that helps me put out content and does other stuff for me. And we're also looking to launch some degree of a writing mentorship for Indian kids. When I say kids, I mean like 17, 18-year-olds. So I'm exactly at that stage where the goal in front of me looks very ambitious, and there's clearly mindsets slash beliefs slash even skills that I have to acquire to get to that. Um, just based on where you are sitting at, right? Having built a startup, now building another one. What skills, mindsets slash habits have you had to acquire?
Wow, what a question. So I think immediately what comes to mind is something that is actually quite simple, but learning
Mm,
from past mistakes, the
mm,
infinite number of mistakes we've made along the way, right? We've done great things, but we've made a ton of errors, right? And I think honestly, that's one of the most, outside of the core product thinking and thinking about the core opportunity, that is something I'm almost like always hyper paranoid about. Like, how are we approaching the system? How are we approaching the problem? How are we ensuring that we're building this thing holistically and taking all the right steps? So yeah, sounds probably very, very generic, almost drab advice, but that's honestly one of the biggest things
mm,
that I have learned, just to like introspect on um, the uh, the mistakes that we've made before, whether it's building or selling or working with brands or agencies or whoever, and ensuring that like the roads are clear for
mm.
inspo. So just getting good at looking ahead, right? So I think that's one of the that's one of the more kind of tangible qualities that I feel like I've cultivated more and more, and that's being good at zooming in to like the minutia
Mm,
and the extreme level of detail, and be sitting and like either wireframing or sitting with design team and thinking extremely deeply about like a very, very minute area of the product, but then later in the afternoon zooming out and thinking about the next 2-3 years of the industry, right? And
mm.
how are we positioning ourselves for not just success in a year or 2 years, but in 5, in 10? Because I think, again, something I've just learned about myself as an entrepreneur is that I feel like I can only work on something if I have like extremely long-term conviction in it, even if it doesn't last that long,
Yeah.
right? Like I can't. We did a fundraise relatively recently, and obviously investors. A lot of questions I got asked was just about what's your ambition here, right? What's the plan,
Mm,
right? Like, are you looking for an exit? Are you looking to sell this? Do you think a massive agency or a creative media company will come along and acquire you? And I've always like fumbled with that question, like
mm.
quite badly, because you know um, I think that is not the plan. Firstly, right? Like that may end up becoming an eventuality because it's, let's say, just the right thing to do as a business owner and for the shareholders at some point, um, because it just is. But that's never the ambition or the dream. That will probably come out of a more of a need rather than a want, right? I think
Mm.
if there's always an avenue to build something that's self-sustaining, that grows and inspires the world, that will always be the route that we choose, right? So I have no idea what the question was
That's
and how
fine.
we
That's
got
fine.
here, but this is where we are,
That's fine. That's fine.
right?
No, I only asked because it comes from a selfish desire because I want to learn about that.
Okay, right.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Skills, and yeah.
Yes,
So
yes, yes.
exactly. So yeah, just to sum that up, basically, um, getting just more level-headed about
Mm,
what you're working on, right? And
right.
not getting too caught up in something or the other, or panicking about this part or that part. Just being quite level about like, okay, and cutting through noise and hype, right? I
Hmm.
think especially when you're on a place like Twitter, it can be it's almost like a daily emotional roller coaster, right? You'll see people in the industry like succeeding to no end, and you'll be like, oh gosh, like I need to be doing more of that, like that
Yeah.
things aren't working out for us, and just being very level and cutting through that because of maybe a little bit of maturity, wisdom, just knowing that look, ultimately it's a lot of things are just hype, right? And
Mm,
there's a lot of like polish in the world, and I don't think the world needs a lot more polish. I think it just needs a lot more depth of experience. And
yeah.
if I think if you're truly building that, it may take a little bit longer, right? But if you have a longer run view, you'll get there. And then you've got to figure out, of course, but you can't be too like almost like visionary egalitarian about it. You got to realize that it's also a company, it's a
Yeah.
business, right? And you don't have infinite runway at all. And it's fine having a 5 year, 10 year view or a 20 year view, whatever it may be. But you also need to get there and convince like investors or customers to help you get there. So you've
Right.
got to take extremely like practical on the ground decisions as
Hmm.
well. So just balancing that like here and now, lessons from the past and also like the future and where we're going. So just navigating those different dimensions.
Fantastic. Um, what I got from that is you have to deliberately learn how to ignore a lot of hype, right? And I say that in response to also, I can just pinpoint the last couple of current events. There's something called doggy coin, Bitcoin. There's just these terms I see on Twitter by tech folks that I don't understand, right? Um, there's hype. There's all kinds of reactions from public figures to stock markets, GameStop, all of that, just like stuff that you see on the outside. To me, it seems like what you do um, isn't in sync with what someone would call a lean startup. I mean, what I'm getting from all of this is you have your blinders on about what you're willing to ignore. What are some of those things?
A lot of the things that you just mentioned, right? Like honestly, a lot of like just current affairs,
Hmm.
right? As in, I read and try and understand to the best of my ability, but I consciously like don't get involved when I can't bring any value or don't have
Hmm.
like a meaningful perspective on it. And I'm also, I think I'm just comfortable with being like ignorant about a lot of things as well. And this is maybe I'm just like not, as intelligent as a lot of other people who can manage to like dive deep into a ton of different areas.
Yeah.
I know that's not me. I'm just, that's just not the way I know how to work and do things.
Hmm.
Um, on your point around lean startup, so I think I would say that we internally absolutely are in the sense like we move very quickly,
Hmm.
right? Like we ship updates very very frequently on
Hmm.
the product. We're speaking to customers, and there's a real sense of momentum and aggression around it. I think what I love about our team is it's just not frenetic, right?
Hmm.
It's not like wild or out
Massive
of
difference between
control.
speed and freneticism.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just like it's very it's there's a humility to it. It's level, and and that's quite sobering and refreshing,
Hmm.
actually. So that just prevents us from getting too like derailed. Because I think, of course, it's I love Twitter. Right? It's a real engine for growth and learning. Um, you've just got to be quite conscious about like how much you get sucked into it because it can also just be a huge time sink,
Hmm.
right? And just make you feel like quite bad about yourself and what's happening in the world and what you're working on. So I think it's just like understanding how to filter it, and where you can bring value and how and why you're there as well. I think we may have discussed this the last time, but honestly, it's one of the most, I think, fundamental things that you can do and gifts that you can give yourself is just to ask yourself why are you doing something, right? Like why are you doing it? What are your actual motivations behind this particular action, whether it's like using a particular network or being part of a community or building a specific product.
Hmm.
And if you ask yourself that question enough and you go deep enough with it, you get the clarity that you need. You just know that, okay, well, one of the things I've learned from one of my investors who's a big mentor is that it's always good to define very clearly all the things that you are not.
Mm.
right? Not just the things that you are. So it's great to take calls. Like for instance, like at the start of the chat, I mentioned to you that we've just taken that call that we are never gonna worry about like becoming a creative execution tool,
Sure.
right? Now along the way in a lot of these customer conversations, sometimes like we'll get ideas, right? And we're like, wow, that would be a great thing to build. Um, and it's tempting. It's really, really tempting at times because like, damn, there's actually a market opportunity there,
Right.
right? And we could maybe help. Um, but then that's where the principles and the guardrails super help. It's like, well, why would we do that? Because that's not even that's who we are not, right?
Yeah.
And that get I think that takes like honestly a lot of conviction because sometimes these are all like glittery distractions and it's really really easy to get carried away with them. But again, if you have that longer term view, the path kind of focuses itself for you. But that doesn't give you an excuse to move in. Just give yourself an excuse to move slowly, right?
Mm.
Just because you're like, great, this is where we want to be in 10 years, doesn't mean that you've got 10 years to get there. It's like you got to try and get there today, right? You got to
Yeah.
take the right steps today and keep moving forwards along that path.
Yeah. It's very interesting that you said that you have to try not to give into the temptation of trying to do everything, because especially because once you have a creative team, like resources at your disposal, it becomes almost next to impossible not to like sort of tinker with things and build your own mini kingdom of like ideas, right? um I was watching Jordan Peterson has this personality course, and I'm interested in how people behave and how we're all different from each other because we're all different personalities, acting out of the world. One of the things he's pointed out about between the differences between liberals and conservatives is roughly liberals like to play with potential and conservatives like borders and boundaries, right? And both are important. So in a
Wow.
way, so in a way, what happens is the visionaries of yesterday do not become the founders of tomorrow unless they give some of that constraint to themselves. And that's what I'm realizing as well. There's for every opportunity that I leave out, there is one that I'm saying yes to, and that's going to make all the difference. That's going to be my core competency, and it's a tough thing to do because um, you want to do everything now, and you want to do it forever, and that's just not the way things work. Especially because now that I've also been toying with this idea of product market fit, you might have 10 great ideas that sound perfect in your head. For example, I was when I did Vipassana, I've only done it once. On the seventh day, I had this insane passion just rush through me about the potentials of doing something in the vernacular educating market for people who don't know how to speak Hindi. um, and I couldn't sleep that night at the retreat because I was like, oh, this idea is going to change the world. And once I came out of Vipassana, its intensity completely died down. It was a stupid idea. It led to a bunch of other things, but it just I couldn't help stop. I couldn't stop thinking about it. And like, there's been many times in my life where I've been consumed by ideas, but then um, you have to make it fit with what the world wants.
I just add one
Hmm.
uh, filter to that as well. I think when so everyone, as you said, talks about product market fit and what the world wants, but I think there's not enough discussion about what you want to also give the world,
Hmm.
right? There may be a market opportunity, but are you the right person to serve and deliver upon that opportunity?
Hmm.
Right? And this is where I think everyone is super different, right? I'm really I have friends who are founders and they are only motivated by the market opportunity,
Hmm.
right? They're like, wow, that is a $100 million market for fish hooks in some part of the world that's been completely, neglected, and I can deliver upon that need.
Right.
They don't care, and then I'll ask, cool, that's interesting, but like to deliver anything will take time, right? So are you willing to commit, let's say, X number of years of your time, your life, to that opportunity? Like, do you care that much about the product or the need? They're like, no, couldn't care less, right? Could not care less, but I'm motivated to like it's not just about making 100 million, but it's also just about like the almost the joy of doing business, right? The joy of
Mm,
spotting on a gap, and then serving that need. I know that's just not, I personally don't connect to that at all.
mm,
Like I would not be able to get out of bed in the morning, right? If I didn't like spark a little bit at the idea itself and what we're trying to do, and see myself as a fundamental customer.
mm,
Um, so yeah, so many different ways that you can do it, but I think this concept of founder market fit is really important, and then there's so many others like narrative market fit and all of these others, and they're equally important. I think because you know uh, if you're the wrong person to build that product, then it's going to be a lot harder for you to even do it. And then even if you do it, you may not enjoy it as much as you think. So it's
mm,
good. It's good to care. It's good to really like love the medium um, that you're serving. At least for me.
hmm. Yeah, I started with producing writing content on YouTube, and I like that. Um, but then
Yeah.
people started approaching me for helping them write stuff, and I realized I don't like that, and I don't like writing for other people because
Yeah.
it's just. And I remember one thing you wrote on LinkedIn once, like the qualities that make you unemployable make you a ferocious entrepreneur, and that's true. Because I deeply understand the principles behind what makes good writing. I can teach you people, but I don't want to write your essay for you. I want to give you the tools so that you can do it yourself, right? I just don't like doing that service. It's just not me to provide services because I don't like
Yep.
being held accountable at 3 and that this wasn't done. It's just, and I realized I need to switch to something that I like, and I started doing some degree of observational comedy in Hindi on YouTube, which is I don't even have to think about it. It's just what I do privately all the time. It's a natural extension of who I am. And so something that originates from that later on becomes a part of the service, I'm much more happy to do as opposed to this one skill that I have some principles around, because I won't be happy once it scales, which it will eventually scale if I put enough, effort into it. And then, like, I don't know, 35 unhappy customers later, I'm like, shit, I'm in the wrong business. Because yeah.
Yeah. There's someone I just remembered some Venn diagram I saw somewhere on the internet when you were just saying this, and it was
Mm,
what was the diagram? It was you should do work that's at the intersection of like what you love, what you can get paid for, and what people want.
yeah, yeah.
Right? And yeah, that does actually make a lot of sense from a business perspective. But at the same time, I think as a human being, you should always do things that you enjoy, even if it's in a part-time capacity, right? Because there's so much almost, within one of your niche interests, there is guaranteed to be some opportunity,
For
right?
sure.
It may not be like a massive startup, but who cares? Like, who's bothered about that? I think you'd enjoy a lot just yeah, for if let's say you're a reader of fiction, just like reviewing books in an interesting way on TikTok,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Like that's probably not happening enough. That would be cool.
Mm,
Doesn't need to become your startup or your business, but it's just a really cool thing to do, right? And then as I'm sure you've experienced this, but the more you actually just engage in that hobby, the more opportunities,
naturally.
you know,
Yep.
just surface, and you cultivate real intuition for that entire world and space. So I think, yeah, there just needs to be a lot of like less agenda driven work in the world,
Mm,
and just role play, right? This doesn't make any sense to do, but it's fun. It makes you smile. It inspires you, and you just go down that rabbit hole. Something good almost always comes out the other side.
absolutely. Yeah. I just made a tweet today about how, we've sort of like killed hobbies pretty much. I
I
remember,
saw that. Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
I love that. Yeah.
because I remember as a kid, people asking me, so what are your hobbies? That was a question that was often asked around in the city that I was in my social circle. Even parents would ask me. And then somewhere along the lines, I don't know what happened, but this sort of died down. And I started seeing people broadcasting their side hustles, which is what I started with as well, right? Um, and so there aren't enough loud and articulate people who just have hobbies. There's enough people who will beatbox on the side, but also make it a side hustle, but then also broadcast it, so it becomes this performative medium. and it's less about the private satisfaction from it. And if you even like make a case for like just being privately satisfied with this thing that has no end in mind, then people will frown upon you. And I'm only saying that because I've been on that. When I see friends creating for themselves, I almost struggle to not criticize them and say, hey, you should document this, you should make it into content. And lately I've stepped back from that because I realize there's just some things can just be, your private sacred space that really don't have anything to do with, oh, do you see I can dance, do you see I can paint, uh did you see the way I knit stuff? It's just this, the side hustle culture, which inevitably leads to some people making professions out of them, has decimated hobbies. And I would love for leisure and hobby to return to even India, the way it's, second nature in maybe like Europe.
I think that's such a beautiful point and a remarkable point. I mean, when I read your tweet, um, it really struck a chord actually because I can't remember the last time I was asked that question,
Yeah.
but I do remember I was asked all the time as a kid, and I would like ask people as well, like, what are your hobbies? And it was such a almost currency, right? It was like it was a lot of fun, and there was never, oftentimes there just wasn't any ambition
Hmm.
there as such. It was just like it's fun, and I got called out by a few friends recently about this. They were sharing like some of the stuff that they were doing, and I thought it was awesome, and just couldn't turn off that like entrepreneurial part of your mind. I'm like, wow, this is what you could do next, and you could build this audience, and then have you thought about this kind of partnership? They're like, I don't want to do any of that. It's like really fun. I'm like, yeah, but there's only like 10 people reading this right now. And he was like, yeah, so like it's 10 people. These are 10 people I really care about. And I was like, wow, I really, really I respect and admire that. And I think almost everyone's in a rush to scale, right? In some way, shape, or form. As you said, like a side hustle, it's almost like the end goal is for it to become a hustle or a company.
Right.
Why can't it just like remain, right? You don't actually have to become world class at it or turn it into your livelihood. You can just keep playing, for the sake of play, actually, for the just joy, for the sake of joy, as opposed to anything else.
Yeah, I think we're in that cultural moment where this is going to skew to the extreme, where everything is being broadcasted and then come back where it belongs. Um, Also because like you were criticized by your friends, I was having a couple of beers with a friend yesterday, and I said, you know what, let's just race these chairs. So I have these chairs, I have four of them, and we were trying to race these chairs, and I was like, we did one race, it was super fun. We were like, let's record this, and because naturally I want to create content, and this seems fun and whatever, right? So I couldn't stop myself, and terrific recordings of like slow motion recordings of me winning, gloating about it and all that, just like a lot of like camaraderie, all of that. And then I was like, oh, this is going to be a great vlog, just wait till Monday, I'm going to get it uploaded, I'm going to get my editor to edit. He's like, please don't upload this. I spent at least half an hour convincing him why it was the best idea. He was like, I don't want to upload it. And this has happened to me again and again and again, where I'm like a slimy salesman-esque figure, just trying to squeeze every opportunity to make content. Um, and thankfully, most of my friends are content creators, so it's fine now. But I've had roommates just not talk to me for days because I was like, "This is a great thing. We could do this together." And I just see opportunity in everything, and I want to act on it right now. And then I realized people are drastically different in the way they approach broadcasting their lives or their work, and it's a tough pill to swallow. But I mean, I really want to upload that vlog. I'm going to try again today and convince him, but it's just one of those things where you realize not everyone is built from the same metal. Some people just want parts of their lives, they just want that this part of me remains separate. This has nothing to do with ambition, or this is not a this is not a point protruding outward that will become like a mountain. This is just something that's inside me. Yeah, but I still struggle. I find every opportunity I can find, I'm always giving people ideas about what they can do, and because it's so painful also, because you see their potential, you see what they could
Right.
become, and you almost can't help yourself. You just start pouring out. Then you're like, oh fuck, I'm sorry. Am I goading you too much to do this? They're like, no, 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 this is great. And then the other thing that happens is sometimes I'll give them these great ideas, and like in my head, the perfect blueprint is created, and I see them not acting on it, and acting on it. I'm like, maybe I should just keep this to myself. Maybe there's another way to channel this excess energy of helping people. I don't know.
There's a I read this lovely short story slash poem, whatever it was, on Paulo Coelho's blog a very, very long time ago, and I think I was in high school.
He has a
And
blog.
it was a yeah, he has a blog. I don't read it anymore actually, but I
Mm,
did. And it was about like um it was a bit someone was asking questions to a businessman,
mm,
saying that why are you doing what you're doing? And he said, so that I can make all this money, and then I can be successful in the city and buy these things. And eventually, like, this person kept questioning him, like, why? But why does that matter? He said, and it's when he got to the root of it, he said, well, so I can settle down in a village and like fish, right? And live in nature with my family. And the person who was questioning him was like a fisherman, right? Who was very happy, and the business person was giving him all this advice and like things that he needs to do. He was like, well, why don't you just do it? I'm doing it, right? And I think for me, it was just I really butchered that story. It's actually really, really poetic and beautiful, but I paraphrased it awfully. But the point was that, like, if we're all looking for happiness, right? Ultimately, that's the whole game. We're all looking to be happy and to feel comfortable with ourselves and to like respect ourselves.
mm.
And I think a lot of people, like wiser people, they just figure out that you don't need to do all these podcasts and build these companies to like feel good about yourself, Dhrupad and Vinamre, right? Like, it's all nonsense, but we enjoy it, right? And it is a lot of fun. But I think that awareness is important. That, like,
Yeah.
not everything has to be a mission. Not everything has to be like optimized and driven. So
Yeah, it's hilarious. It's I'm just thinking about all the times in my life where I've just said to myself, once I do this specific thing, then I'm gonna go on this 18-month
yeah,
tour of the world and specifically immerse myself in these cultures and live anonymously. And that gets carried over to the next state and the next state. And this dream started at 21. I'm 24 right now. And I always thought that I would never repeat the mistakes of the generations before me. But it's sort of funny how there's almost like a condition put on your idle lifestyle, or like the idle scenario in which you would become completely happy. Um, but I also have a strange concept around paying the devil his due, where I do believe we're made for work, and if I'm not working too much, just the way I'm wired, something inside me
yeah.
snaps, and I just become neurotic. And but when I'm working, I can see myself. It's just very calm in my head when I'm working. But when I'm like tranquil, not necessarily tranquil, when I'm idle for a long time, I just it just my mind, even when I'm like at rest, my mind will think of the potential of things all the time, and I don't know how to shut it off.
And nor should you, right? Because that's who
Yeah,
you are.
right.
That's what I think is beautiful about it. It's that I think everything is just a play of energy. You have this immense, like, creative potential energy, and you just have to find the right, like, channels
Hmm.
for it. And I think, you know, the pursuit of things is beautiful, right? I think where we become miserable and frenetic and neurotic is like when we become too attached to the outcomes and
Right.
the destinations, right? But actually, I think engaging in your craft is it's a really noble thing to do, and to be present and to enjoy it fully. That's great. That's honestly why I think we're here in the world for.
Hmm.
Um, but when we become too attached to outcomes and growth and success and all of that, that's when it becomes quite like a bitter experience. And just, I think, reminding ourselves that, like, the journey, right? It's like
Hmm.
back to back to I mean, not back to motorcycles. We haven't talked about it as yet, but the last time we were chatting about riding and journeying versus destination,
Right.
right? Like it's not about just getting from A to B. It's like that's almost like the Silicon Valley view of the world. Like everything has to be optimized, right? Every route, every relationship, everything that you do, every task, right? A workflow,
Yeah.
workflow. Um, but
Yeah.
I
It's
think,
like when you discovered Tim Ferriss before you figured out how to make a daily schedule. That's basically
yeah,
what it is.
exactly. But I think like there's a joy in the absolutely the unoptimized and the unreasonable and
Mm,
the inefficient, because it's fun.
mm. Yeah, there's no other way to describe it. I've been spending a lot of time with my dad lately, and he works in the unorganized sector, which deals with the purchasing and selling of agricultural land. Um, and because he's educated, but he also understands sort of like how rural India behaves, operates, the lingos, even the way certain pieces of land are, because they don't use the unitary system, they use like an ancient Mughal system. So he understands all of that. Whenever I hang out with him, I am filled with two thoughts. One, why didn't I apprentice under him before? I've always had my own ambitions, right? One. Um, Number two, it's the entire system is so bloody inefficient that you can just laugh at it. Um, so you go and like you get lands registered for like the purchasing of a certain deed by like buyers and sellers. Um, the lights will go off, or they'll have only one computer and a shitty printer that will block. Half the people won't show up. Um, Someone will like I don't know get in a fight, and it's just one of those things. It's a world that I always knew from the outline, but I never experienced, and just seeing how my refusal to engage in any gluten foods or drink anything that is not coffee goes out of the window because I have to drink tea in order to like talk to those people. I have to eat the numerous sweets that they offer me, which gives me all kinds of diarrhea. I have to do all of those things which are a part of that, right? And it's like, and waiting for someone to show up for 2 hours is completely normal. And it's a strange world. It's a different world. It's a different world than what you and I live in. And it just makes me realize things can be done in more than one way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think that we're not demonizing efficiency here or markets
Yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah. For
optimization,
sure, for sure.
right? Like I think it's of course extremely important. Like the Western scientific method has driven the world forwards in so many remarkable ways. Um, I think the thing to realize that it's not the only method, right? Like we
Mm,
just worship at this altar of like optimization and making things efficient and and saving time, saving time, saving time, saving time. But and we have all of this time now, but what the hell are we doing with it, right?
binge watching,
So
binge
exactly,
eating.
like we're being miserable. We're absolutely like miserable, and we're wanting to save more and more of it. And you've got quite a lot in the bank, and yet it seems to be slipping away, or you
Mm,
just don't know how to actually distribute it. So I think, yeah, there's a firm believer that there's something to learn from every culture,
mm,
right? And there's so many principles that can be. I don't think we should look at old ancient industries and say and just idolize them,
mm.
and
For sure, for
romanticize
sure.
them because they're not, right. As you know
Yeah.
intimately, like a lot of things, a lot of improvements could make a lot of their lives better,
Mm.
right, and improve their quality of life. But I think it's just I think over reliance on any one framework or ideology or philosophy or mental model or whatever it is just like a recipe for disaster.
Yeah, that's how you become an ideologue. I noticed on your Twitter that you've written this ambitious goal down as a tweet, which is you will now write a fiction book this year. While I already know about that, we sort of briefly talked about like a project that you had back in 2016 or 2014, um, the Tibetan waiter. That was it, right?
Yeah, that was
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to talk about that. What I want to talk about is Bandra West, because I was a Bandra. I didn't know when we did the last podcast together that you live in Bandra or you've lived in Bandra. I lived in Bandra for around what was like roughly 8 months, and while those months were turbulent, I suffered from all kinds of depression and loneliness because I was fresh out of college, living in denial about what to do with life, all of those things, and I just escaped into Mumbai. my solace was walking in Bandra, was eating at the umpteen health cafes, which sell way too expensive food. Um, and then meeting with strangers, enjoying drinks, having all kinds of frivolous but also in-depth encounters with people. It's just I don't think criminals want to like even go and invest time in Bandra. It's just so pretty. And it's very strange that, you mentioned a bunch of times about how Bandra is like central to that plot. um, I have jogged a bunch of times in Joggers Park, and I have wondered about the setting sun. And I've skipped past the wall and gone all the way down till the sea with my sports shoes on, and I have sat down there. And it's a strange place in Mumbai. I've seen other parts of Mumbai. Just something about it is just captured in time. How did your love affair with Bandra begin?
So that is a good question. So when we moved HaikuJAM from the UK to India,
All right, because you have the HaikuJAM offices in Bandra, that beautiful building that apparently no one knows what the fuck is about. It is about from the outside.
yeah, and unfortunately we don't anymore. We've gone remote
Okay.
because of all the craziness from last
Of
year,
course,
but that's
of course.
okay. So not in Bandra anymore, but
Mm.
once we raised our first round and finally had some money in the bank, and we decided we were making decisions about where to be. Initially, I think the plan was we'll be in Bangalore because that's where most startups are in technology, and then I'm grateful we were convinced otherwise.
Yeah.
And then yeah, we picked Bombay. Our lead investor was there as well, and then we were basically looking to pick a place. And yeah, Bandra was just beautiful. Like immediately, it just speaks to you, and it was really charming is the word for me. Like it's a really charming
Mm.
place. It's a little hamlet, right? And it's a place that you can just. I think anywhere in India, there's just not a lot of public space. It's not easy to like walk on the road or
Yeah.
walk to some place. And Bandra, it's relatively easy to walk to anywhere. Um, and there's a mix of just like fascinating people and cultures and food and just creativity as well. Like a lot of like interesting just personalities like loitering around.
Mm.
So yeah, for us it was like the perfect place to set up shop and build. So I lived there, walked to work like every day. I took a auto or my bike once I got it, and
Yeah.
very special place. I loved it, and it was just Joggers Park. Where I used to love that place as well. Just like running and
There's
and
barely any green patch, by the way, to exercise. It's just that one little
yeah.
unmetal walking path that everyone runs slash.
And yeah, I love
Yeah.
that, right? That's what I also found amusing. This because like there's no you can't really run on the road because you'll get chased by a dog or something,
Yeah.
or you get hit by a car. That it's just it's a stressful experience just running on the roads in India. But the entire almost like city just congregates in that like park.
Yeah.
And I just love the energy there actually. Like, you've got people who are like training and run and very, very serious runners. Then you have a lot of aunties who are just like walking around,
Yeah.
like eating pakoras and just walking around and having an awesome time. And like, it's just like, it kind of captures the spirit of India, right? There's this complex hodgepodge of people, situation, things, and yet somehow in perfect harmony,
Yeah.
right? Like,
Yeah. Joggers Park is interesting in more ways than one. It's the first time it's the place where I first discovered Sam Harris's Waking Up, that app for meditation. I started doing those there. And I always remember closing my eyes, and then when I opened them, I usually did it by the sea. So I'd actually,
yeah.
bounce over the wall, go all the way down to where the rocks are, and sit at the last point I could barely sit on before the tides actually came over and like submerged me.
You were one of those lone stoic figures on the
Yeah.
rocks. Yeah, I
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
remember.
yeah, yeah. There were usually couples there
Yeah,
transacting
yeah.
their business. A bunch of like semi-fishermen, people just like roaming around drinking. But there's really something special about that whole rocky formation that is just civil residents of Bandra would not dare to cross over that wall, but I always did. And I would return to the park, and I would find like there's a small patch. As soon as you enter the park, there's a small patch of green where most people work out. I don't know if you've seen that.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So the bathrooms are on the left, and on the right there's a small patch, and then in the middle is just like birds and like weird figures and like swings. But anyway, I would work out in that patch, and I did weird exercises, like really weird exercises that I just there were moments when I was turning in a way that was very unpleasant to look at. And I would have several joggers just walk past me and then like make eye contact. And I realized I'm a stranger in the city, so I really should not, care. And like, so I even went berserk with that. But yeah, it's Bandra West is a strange place because I also lived in what I told my friends was like a Portuguese house. But the truth is, it was just a rundown house. Um, but it's like I delusion I deluded myself into believing that it had some sort of an old world charm, but that really wasn't the case. A very ancient house that I lived in, and I think the best part about Bandra was that a lot of my inspiration in those days, when I was trying to figure out my life out, came from long walks
Yeah.
through Perry Road, through 25th Road, Turner Road, all of those places. I'd spend my days at Turner Road Starbucks trying to figure my life out, eating their shitty food. And whenever friends would come to Mumbai, I'd be like, "Yeah, how do they know you?" I'm like, "I'm here all day." That's why they all know me.
I live
Um,
right next to that Starbucks.
yeah,
I lived on Waterfield Road, so right next to.
dude, that's so
Yeah.
weird. If we did a podcast before, like I'm sure we must, because I lived. So you lived in Waterfield Road, right? That's where.
Yeah.
So if you take it right, there's Madras Diaries, that fantastic South Indian place,
South Indian place.
right?
Exactly.
So I
Yeah.
lived exactly opposite from that on 25th Road, where this place called Puja Casa. It's a massive apartment building. I lived right opposite to it in the Sindhi colony. That's so
So we were
weird.
like 2 minutes away from each other.
That's so weird. I never knew.
Yeah.
I only once I moved back home, I discovered like more stuff about Bandra. That there's like this beautiful coffee house called Sapco Coffee. I've ordered a bunch of their coffee a bunch of times. And did you go to Suzette at all?
Yeah. Yeah. Very ordered there more than went there, but
Yeah,
did go there a few times as well. Yeah.
yeah. I loved the clientele at Suzette because as someone who learned the fine arts of what it means to have a vegan eating lifestyle, like this health food, all of that, it was very interesting to see first timers try and order there. And it was also equally interesting to see people who've been like, connoisseurs of like, oh, all I do is eat organic food. It was a mix of those. Um, but yeah, it was super expensive, but like super nice. I used to enjoy eating my food there. Um, and then did you go to what's the word? Irish House?
Irish. Yeah, of course. I watched a couple of football games there, I think,
Hmm.
when, yeah, I can't remember who, but been there a few times.
Yeah, I had no idea Irish House was expensive, and I got up five or six friends there. We had a couple of drinks, and drinks led to more drinks. Suddenly, I realized
Yeah,
they're like, yeah, super expensive. Suddenly, they're
most
like,
places are. Yeah.
yeah. So the bill came out to close to 20K, and everyone was no longer drunk. Yeah,
That was this was a learning as well, I think, going to Bandra, because when you come from the UK, you've got this bad habit of doing the conversion math.
yeah, hmm,
So things seem, pretty affordable compared to like London or Manchester or wherever. But then you're also like earning in rupees, and then you realize very soon that like, okay, your mentality needs to like shift a little
exactly.
bit. So that was a learning point. Initially, I was like, it was funny as well because like my parents are here in the north of England. And of course, they've spent quite a long time in the UK now, so they're pretty familiar with how everything works and how much things cost.
Right.
But I think they're really unfamiliar for paying that much, like 400-500 rupees for like a sandwich,
Yes.
right, or a baguette or something. And I'm like, but it's like £3, £4. And they're like, no, it's 500 rupees. Like like your lunch
Yeah.
shouldn't be that much, right? And it's like, oh, so yeah, we learn, and then and I found my little like dhabas and spots, right?
Yeah.
Which I loved, like little dhaba on Hill Road called Balaji's. Did you ever go there?
I did not. I didn't. I
Um,
didn't frequent Hill Road that much. It was still.
right,
It was still a very non-Bandra part of Bandra for me, just by
right.
how chaotic it was.
Our office was literally just off Hill Road, so Hill Road
Hmm.
was like the go-to place for like a lot of food and and just travel as well. We had to like literally go
Hmm.
through Hill Road to get to our place. So
Did you have a lot of meetings at Birdsong because it was right opposite?
I did at the start, and then I stopped because we had a nice place, and yeah, we just like, okay, just come over. But we had some funny. funny. I wouldn't call them tensions, but I think it's at some point because we opened a cafe, um,
Oh,
HaikuJAM Cafe, and it wasn't like a quote unquote cafe, but essentially every weekend we opened up like our pantry, and the
hmm,
currency was like poetry and creativity. So if you came and you wrote a jam or you wrote 3 lines of a poem, you'd get a coffee,
interesting.
right? Or like if you wrote 6 lines, you get a brownie. And quite a number of people from Birdsong started coming over, and I think a few people at Birdsong were like looking at us like, "Hey, what are you guys doing?" Right? Like, but no, it wasn't any competition at all. Birdsong was a cool place. It was a nice place for conversation. You always spotted interesting people there. There was always like
Yeah.
some actor or actress or director or screenwriter, and you're like, okay, cool.
Yeah, that's one of the first things you learn to slowly make peace with is you're going to bump into famous people when you live in Bandra, and it's not this,
Yeah,
it's not the
like all the
A-lister
time.
type. Yeah, it's this weird indie famous person that you would often bump into in Bandra.
I don't know. It's a yeah, you're right. You're right, but it's a real mix as well. Like one day, who was it? It was I'm forgetting the Hollywood actor who was there. Someone, and they were taking photos out. Dhrupad,
Hmm.
right? And he was taking like selfies with our cottage. I was out that day, and suddenly like things were blowing up, and people were like, "Hey, dude, come back! Like, let's try and get him in." And
Right.
Ali Abhat was there like a lot at Birdsong.
Huh.
But yeah, you get over it very very quickly because also like you just realize that they're people living their lives. They've just come here for like a conversation with a friend. Like, there's no need to be annoying.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this comedian called Abish Matthew. That he's an Indian comedian, and I just saw him at the Turner Road Starbucks a bunch of times, and I stopped. I had never watched his content, but then I was like, okay, this is a human, just going about his day. Whatever I see on the screen is just the stuff that he publishes. He still has a normal life. The So the street that Haiku Jam and Birdsong were on, that led to some village, right? Because the other thing about Bandra West was you have these beautiful lanes, old houses, a lot of Christian people living there, a lot of like new age creators living there. But then you also have these, how do I say it, like urban villages, basically. The like
Yep,
lots of There's Ranwar village. I'm forgetting a couple
exactly.
of names. Yeah. So did you have conversations with people from those villages at all?
Yeah, we did. We had a couple of people who worked at the company who were
Hmm.
literally like native to Bandra, right? And that
Hmm.
was awesome because I mean, so one of our, in fact, this was a crazy story. One of the so our office manager and like admin lead, he is a Bandra native, like been
Hmm.
there all his life. And only after working with us for like quite some time, I think 3, 6 months, he told me, this house, like this cottage, this used to be my friend's place, and I came here all the time as a kid. And I was like, what?
That's
Like
strange.
he's like, yeah, it used to be his house. This like literally where our conference room is. He's like, this is where we used to play. This was his bedroom, and I was like, this must be surreal for you. And he was like, yeah, it's pretty weird actually. Um, so stuff like that happened all the time, and
Hmm.
got to know a lot of people once we were actually like looking for places, and I think our place was always a bit of a landmark. Like some,
Yeah.
I think local folks were like a little upset by it because it was just like a little crazy.
Hmm.
Some people loved it. People always dropped in as
Hmm.
well, like all the time, like every single day. Like, and it got quite annoying after a while because we had this doorbell.
Yeah.
So not people dropping in, that was cool, but we had this like really loud doorbell. And people would press it all the time, and there were like
Just to
so
fuck
many
with you guys.
engineering complaints, and like seriously, we gotta like, it's not a house anymore, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that all happened.
Did you amend your views on open workspaces after that?
A little bit, I think. A little bit. Like, I think it was tough to get deep work done sometimes,
Hmm.
especially I think we talked about this last time. We had a crazy number of events,
Hmm.
right? So the comedian you just mentioned, I think he did a lot of events at the HaikuJAM cottage. as well. Wednesday night was like a comedy night where, there was a jam session in live
I
comedy.
remember that. I remember like logging as a migrant to Mumbai, and I remember logging on to Book My Show and events
Yeah,
outsider insider to check, and like I would see the name pop up all the time.
exactly. So like there were tons of events, and that was awesome for like community building. But it was tough at times just
Hmm.
for focus and work.
Hmm.
But we fixed it. Like we made sure like, okay, first floor was a workspace, like only team members, like as soundproof as we could make it. And no one else was allowed there. So yeah, that's how we did it. But it was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Got to know a lot of people just through this people wandering into the cottage, and they were fascinating people. Literally, like I remember a guy who was like he just sailed around the world, and he was trying to figure out his life, and he just wandered in on a Saturday. We were talking for like 3 hours, went for a walk. It was wonderful, right? And that sort of stuff can like only happen in Bandra.
That's
I
true.
feel it's very difficult for those kind of like conversations to happen in other parts of the city.
I agree. I'd gone out with this childhood friend of mine who went to the same school as I, and we were talking very animatedly about our own dating lives. And this woman on a table right next to us was taking frantic notes.
Whoa.
Yeah, and I was looking from the corner of my eye, is this writing about us? I was a bit concerned, right? Because it's you don't. It only happens in movies where a journalist will frantically write away literally what is happening right in front of their eyes. Like, um, then she was joined by this chef guy, and he was Mexican, and this woman was Indian. And I think because we were speaking loudly, and because we were speaking like childhood friends too, without any concern for filters, she had to chime in. She's like, okay, that's it. I have to stop you right there. Like, I think what you're saying about dating, like here and here, is like wrong. We had generational difference for sure. She was like at least 20 years older than us, which led to more conversations around how this guy from Mexico had started dating this woman and blah 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 blah. Next thing we know, we're in this Mexican's house in Bandra, and a bunch of like other expats also show up. Someone who's like a semi stripper, but like very very rich, and just goes and strips in Mumbai in a way that does not make sense. Someone who's an interior designer, just like these people that I'd never met, and they're treating us to olives, grapes, cheese, more wine, beer, only because they overheard us speaking. Um, it was strange. I've had experiences like that in Boston, but that makes sense because the student city, right? There's students, you just vibe and stuff happens. But it was weird because we had nothing in common when it comes to life experiences or age groups or even ethnicity. So,
What I feel is that Bandra, it's a really transitory place for a lot
hmm,
of people, and it attracts almost a certain kind of person at a particular life stage as
hmm,
well, right? So you have a lot of people who just live there, and it is their home. But I think for a lot of folks, they're almost just like professionally wandering, right? Like
that's a good way of putting it.
and they've carved out that time and space for themselves not to be busy and to be super open. Right?
Hmm.
So one of my don't really live with regrets as such, but like I feel I could have especially enjoyed the serendipity a little bit more. I
Hmm.
was so like obsessed about startup building that there was a lot of things that I maybe didn't do as much, which would have been a lot of fun, right?
Yeah.
Like just randomly like talking to a stranger and then going to a party or like spending the whole night having a conversation. Like a lot of that stuff did happen.
Hmm.
But oftentimes I'd put a stop to it, like, okay, I've got this thing in the morning, like we gotta go and build and back in the office. So but yeah, no regrets, but that happens a lot. And I think
Yeah.
people are really open to it because you notice that there's people from all around the world there, right? It's also the advantage of just like no one comes with almost any like social baggage, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
You just it's like have you read Shantaram?
Of course.
All right. So yeah, very kind of Leopold's Cafe vibe, right?
Hmm.
Like everyone is there to almost like discover a part of themselves that they don't even know about yet, and people have time, and more
Yeah.
importantly, they're willing to make time.
Mm. Detached wanderers with like willing to flirt with openness to experiences, something like that. Yeah, although I did not notice this sort of openness in what is called the town area. I'd heard a lot about it. I was excited to go there, but for some reason, for some strange reason, just being alone out in Bandra at 3 a.m. felt more relaxing and comforting than
Yeah.
just wandering like in a random but more posh area of Mumbai, if that makes sense.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I think some of my like happiest, most memorable moments were honestly like in the very, very early days of the cottage when it was still the team was like with this massive cottage and only hired like 4 people or 5 people, right? Early
Hmm.
engineers who'd taken a big bet to come and join us for this crazy idea and move from a different city, right,
Hmm.
or a different part of the country. And Friday evening, like finish work, get some food, and just go to like either Carter Road or Bandstand, just walk around, and then
Yeah.
like just talk, man. And then it's like 4 a.m., right, and the police are like kicking you out, and then just going home and doing it again, like over the weekend. It
Hmm.
was that was like some of the most beautiful conversations happened there. And in fact, it was a lot of you mentioned this about Joggers Park, but it was a really interesting place to like people watch,
Yes.
right? Because I feel like there's something so enchanting about the water anywhere in any city. I think like coastal cities, but especially I think in a place like India where you know that the inner city, it's like it's a jungle. There's like no peace there. There's no like space to really dream or to think or to aspire to
Hmm.
anything. So you can see how the entire city on like a weekend just congregates at those like few remaining public spaces like Marine Drive or Bandra or wherever. And you just see people like really just living their lives and dreaming and
It's insane.
just it's
Yeah.
beautiful. It's like it really I used to get very emotional about it actually, just seeing like a lot of like young kids. And if you just overheard a conversation about like how they're trying to like work through something and you're like, oh man, I like really wish you well, you know?
The one thing that you notice in Mumbai is that it really makes you feel like there's more protagonists in the story than you yourself. Because,
Oh yeah, dude, everyone is a hero, man. Like and you love it as well. There's no like jealousy, there's no like insecurity. You're just like, okay, I want everybody to like win
yeah,
and find meaning in their lives because this is beautiful.
yeah, it's a very amazing sense of solidarity that now that I live in Delhi, it's hard for me to see that. But there's like an unspoken code on the street in Mumbai and an
Yep.
unspoken code off the beach. Um, it's I don't know. It's just that there's always this sort of toughen up and enjoy the toughness that we all mutually share, because we're all trying to find solace and meaning in this magnificent city that is sometimes considered to be an elusive city. But it's like you're playing dice with a bunch of people together, and you're like willing to place your bets in the sea and hope that the sea returns them, something like that. I don't know, the experience around the sea. I remember my first night in Marine Drive with the woman I was briefly dating, and I just lay there for like 2 hours just on the concrete slab. And I think beyond my times in the Himalayas where that was possible, in cafes where that level of laze was acceptable, right, I hadn't been able to just be in a public space like that. And so I also realized there's a lot more freedom of movement in public spaces in Mumbai than maybe there is in other cities, now that I've lived in some other cities.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. Um, and especially so at like the fringes, right? Like the
Hmm.
coasts
Hmm.
and the parks. And I feel like there's a lot of sharing that happens, right? Whether it's shared struggle,
Hmm.
right? And almost indulging in that shared struggle, or like shared joy, or if there's a festival, like just sharing in that festivity. And I feel like just when you bring um, people together in a shared space, a lot of wonders happen, especially in a place like Bombay, where I feel like people are just like naturally a little bit more expressive, right?
Hmm.
They
Why do you
are,
say that?
I don't know why I say it. It's something I feel like I've just observed from people. Like I find that people are, if you go to a guy in the street in England
Hmm.
and you ask him like, "What are your dreams?" right? Like,
Yeah.
like politely walk away and like brand you as a lunatic, right? Whereas in Bombay, I feel quite secure asking that question to people and being asked that question, and someone will be like, okay, like take you to the local chai place, beto, let me tell you. Right. And it's like, and I love that. And all the, from almost like every touch point and interaction in the city, right? Like as soon as
Yeah.
you arrive in the airport, you get into a local cab, and a guy, the driver, he moved to the city because he wanted to write scripts or something, and it didn't work out, but he's not bitter about it. Right. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what's incredible. Like there's frustration, of course, because like life is tough for a lot of people, but not a ton of resentment. Of course, huge generalization, but you know what I mean, like
I
just
know.
the
Yeah.
general sense. And they're still like almost as in love with the city as they were, even though they're swearing and criticizing like the other guy on the road, and like a lot of anger on the street, but
Yeah.
there's still there seems to be a lot of like almost pride in the city as
Mhm.
well. Like they're all very. I find people are very aware of like that the crumbling infrastructure and all of these problems,
Right.
but they love to point out landmarks, right? Like I find it incredible how proud people seem to feel by like going past Ambani's house,
Or Amitabh Bachchan's house. That's
Amitabh
the
Bachchan's house, right? And they're
yeah.
like, there's so much like almost pride in that, and I'm like, wow, it was new to me. I never seen something like that before,
For
actually.
me, what struck out was I've landed in and out of Bombay airport, I think about like 25, 30 times right now, by now. And if I so much as hint at what, like saying that I'm new to this place, most taxi drivers take on the role of being a tour guide, and
Oh yeah,
they start with the film stars, which is the funny part. It's like they consider it a duty to do whatever they can, irrespective of whether they're introverted or extroverted. Like they'll do whatever they can to make you enamored with the first love they felt for Bombay, or the love they continue to feel.
yeah. They are the true ambassadors of the city, man. And the funny
Absolutely.
thing is, I think I get that talk every single time just because of my accent, and they can see that you're clearly not from here. I'm like, but I've been living here for like a few years now. That no, no,
Right.
no. Let me tell you how it is, and I love it. I really like. Yeah. I always
Yeah.
like do my best not to be distracted in
Yeah.
cabs, and like not to be listening to a podcast or on a call. I'm like, okay, just yeah, enjoy the ride and enjoy the story.
Do you I mean, that's a stupid question to ask, but you obviously listen to music. Have you listened to this song called Alchemy by Bandis Project?
I think I have, but it's not like coming to mind. But I'm pretty sure I have at some point.
It's this rapper, sort of slow spoken word style rap about India, with fantastic traditional instruments in the background and a beautiful video. I'll send it to you. It's amazing. Just makes me sort of take a bird's eye view and understand the country that I'm living in. And then there's this other song by actually, a musician from the UK was on this podcast, Sarthi Korwar. I don't know if you know of him, but it's with this Mumbai rapper called MC Mawali, and the song is called Mumbai. It's also crazy. It's like Sapno ka Sheher Azadi Har Pal. It's just um, it, a lot of really good stuff slash music I've discovered around Bombay that makes me want to love it from afar has often come from, not from like the locals, because I already sort of know their experience. Like it's
Yeah,
already pervasive in the city, right? But people who've sort of been in Bombay for 3 months or 3 years,
yeah,
right? Or like a collaboration between like someone who wants to live in Mumbai and vicariously lives in it through the movies, right? Just stuff around that. So I'll send you those two songs. They're fantastic. Um, I think we've been chatting for a while. So to sort of start to close things off, what are you reading nowadays?
I am reading. What am I reading? I'm reading the sequel to Shantaram,
What
which
is it?
is
Mountain
the
Shadow?
the Mountain Shadow,
Yeah.
exactly. And I'm reading Snow Crash by Neil Stevenson, the book about his kind of first story about the metaverse and virtual reality and that sort of stuff. So
Fascinating.
yeah, those are the two books I'm reading. Like Mountain Shadow is a very long book, so it's going to
I
take some
haven't heard
time.
much about
But
Mountain Shadow. Like Shantaram is the one that's very popular in culture, but like
yeah,
almost no one knows about Mountain Shadow. I only know of it because I looked up his name once.
yeah, I think that's how I also only knew of it. I finished Shantaram like towards the end of last year,
Hmm.
and I just wasn't ready to leave that world. I'm really bad at leaving fictional worlds,
Hmm.
like emotionally and mentally. Like I just felt like, okay, I'm not ready um, to leave, right? And it feels like 900 pages later, it still feels like too sudden and abrupt. So then I found out that, oh my God, there's a sequel. Like, and I was like, really making this almost like cost benefit analysis that it's another like 1,000-page book, and like you could read. There's so many other authors to read, but I decided to do it, and I'm really glad that I did because it's. I'd recommend that at some point, if you're so inclined, like check it out
Hmm.
because it's
It
it's
does.
very different to
Hmm.
Shantaram.
Yeah. Is it also
It's
based in
like,
Mumbai?
yeah, dude. So it's basically literally a continuation of his story,
Huh.
except it's a new Bombay, right? Where
Oh, Navi
like
Mumbai, right?
it's I don't know if it's explicitly about Mumbai, but it's more about like how. So you know how like Shantaram was super super like idyllic and
Hmm.
almost a little bit like star spangled, like he was
Yeah.
so in love,
Even with
right, with
Dharavi. Yeah.
almost like every single aspect and nook and cranny of the city, right? This one feels like a lot darker, more
Ah.
cynical, and that's because like a lot of the people he's loved have passed away or been killed in gang wars, and the kind of ideals of the gang that he was in are also crumbling because the leader was killed, right, in the
Yes.
previous book, Gadharbai. So it's a new city, right, and he's no longer feeling the same sort of like maybe a welcome that he felt before, and he's a lot more kind of at war with himself. So it's fascinating. It's
I'm gonna
like,
buy it. I'm gonna buy it. I love seeing characters go astray, and then I want to
yeah,
see if it resolves itself in the end, or if it goes worse. Because I'm good at dealing with tension. I can just leave with a book that I can just be fine with a dark ending. But I like that sort of first love for Mumbai has started to show its fangs to him, based on what you're saying.
yeah, no, and I think that the love is still there, and I think that's what hurts him a
Hmm.
lot. It's the fact that like he knew what this city was and how he'd
Right.
experienced it, and now that feels like it's being taken away from him. And I'm very early on in the book still, like literally
Hmm.
quarter of the way through, and yet he seems to be thinking that like it's his time to leave now, right?
Ah.
And I think that just reading it, from the kind of nuances and the descriptions of the places, it feels like, although it's still based like not in present day Mumbai,
Hmm.
it's still very much like, generation before us. But it feels a little bit more reminiscent of a lot of the things that are there today,
Hmm.
right? It's like less, almost like less romantic in its view, and quite appropriately, like written. It's the shadow of a mountain, right? I don't know why it's been named that yet. I haven't even got far ahead to understand like if that's a metaphor or if a specific reference, but it
Hmm.
does feel like it was. So Shantaram, I feel, was written in the light, and this was written in the shadows, right?
Yeah. Have you
And
have you watched the
that's.
White Tiger? Is that where it's coming from?
I haven't watched that yet. I'm going to. That's my plan over the next few days. I
Yeah.
love the book, but I haven't watched it. Have you
Thank
have you seen
you.
the show?
So from all the people I've been having a conversation with, I was gonna make a YouTube video for my Hindi channel. People haven't read the book, and if you watch the movie, like you like the movie for sure. But the thing with adaptations is they leave a lot of important stuff out.
Yeah.
Because
No, you got to read the book. I mean,
yeah,
it looks incredible as a film, but like the book was extraordinary. The book was just
fantastic.
incredible.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of very important things that you saw in the book that you were like, because one of the things that Aravind Adiga did is he introduced strange terms and experiences that were not ever available to the Indian psyche, at least in literature. It's the world of drivers. It's the world of 5 rupee erotica. It's the world of like getting beaten. It's the world of what happens in the rooms beneath hotel rooms. It's all of that.
Right.
Um, Another book I highly recommend is this is about very much about like the Bombay of today. It's called Low by Jeet Thile.
I
Uh,
know about this. It's on my.
yeah,
I think I've got it on my Kindle somewhere, but
yeah,
I've not read it.
it's fantastic. It's really the sort of Mumbai that you and I have lived in, and that like adds a layer because this guy also travels from New York to Mumbai to go on a drug bender to cope cope with the death of his wife, and that itself, mine. I just
Wow.
like books about Mumbai. Um, like this is definitely on the top of my list. Low.
Yeah, in fact, that's how I discovered that book because
Mm,
for my own research, but also just after, living in Bombay and, reading stories based in Bombay and Shantaram, I felt I'm ready for more, right? Because it's such a, you just almost can't get enough of the place, right? And
yeah.
then as you said, like I'm fascinated by like the different perspectives around Bombay because it feels like the local people will don't do an awesome job of telling Bombay's story.
Hmm.
But that's partly because I think they are the protagonists in Bombay's story, right? So it's very difficult to
Without the
tell a
narrators.
story, right? Very difficult to tell a story about themselves
Yeah.
because they're living it. But I find the people who like hop in, right, for a few months or a year or wherever, and consciously make it a home.
Hmm.
I love to hear those perspectives because, like, I feel that there's this huge thread of commonality between all of those narratives, right? Um, and yeah, love the place.
Fantastic, man. I love how this organically transitioned into a discussion about Mumbai and Bandra. I didn't expect this at all. Well, so much for not expecting anything and serendipity. It's been a blast having you on the podcast once again, Dhrupad. I wish you best of luck for Get Inspo. I'll be one of the public beta testers when you announce that, because I find myself in a creative drought at this point in my life. So I'm very excited for that product to come out, and best of luck. And hopefully I'm going to see you and chat with you and maybe get a drink once you're actually in India or when I'm in Europe, whenever that happens, because there's clearly a lot more. It's very strange, this entire lockdown. I've just met people on the internet, on Zoom.
Yeah.
I'm sure you have as well. So what I'm doing now is, now that the world has opened up a bit more, is fossilizing those connections by meeting them in real life as much as I can. So yeah, look forward to that.
Can't wait, man. Thank you. Always a pleasure jamming with you. And I'll be back soon in Bombay. So it'll be good for you to come back and we can go to Bandra.
Sounds good, man. I'd love to get our wallets ripped off at Suzette's.
Cheers, man. Thank
All
you.
right, man. Bye-bye. Take care.